I'm odeean, and today I'm having a look at the S.H.Monsterarts first release of Godzilla. So here we've got Godzilla in his awesome, terrifying face, but more importantly, moving down to the bottom of the box, you'll see that the first release includes this blue sticker, which indicates that the effect part is included in the box. So his effect part is the blue beam atomic breath, and if you want that, you're really going to have to get the first version of this, because the reissue coming out now doesn't include it. So here is Godzilla in all his handsome glory, and he is a really beautiful figure to look at. Briefly, a history of this from my point of view is that I had avoided S.H.Monsterarts for a long time, a couple of years now, and that's mainly because at first I didn't like Godzilla, and then when I did get a love for the character, I thought it was more prudent to pick up some of the older vinyl figures that were a large scale, like 12-inch, because they were becoming harder to find and more expensive. And really that's worked out pretty good for me. I've got most of the figures that I wanted, so now I'm freed up to move on to Monsterarts. Just looking at Godzilla, you can see he's really done superbly. He's a beautiful figure to display or play with. He is literally covered with sculpted detail from head to tail. Every bit of this kaiju has tiny little sculpted scales and things on, and it's not just paintwork. In fact, there's virtually no paint on the bulk of the figure, and I think that's because they didn't want the parts that rub together to be scraping off the paint. He does have a good degree of paint on the scales, which on my one seem to be almost grey in appearance, although in the photos I've seen of this figure they were mainly whitish, but not having a second one to look at, I can't tell if mine's just a bit aberrant or if they really are grey scales. On the claws down here we have some whiter paintwork, and again on the fingernail claws more white. If I can just move my camera a little bit, have a look at that face. So you can see on his face, his eyeballs are really intense. They're done so good. And in hand, because the figure isn't that big, the eyeballs aren't that big, it can be a little bit difficult to see those shiny eyes. But on camera, I think, especially still photography, when you get close-ups of his face, it can be quite impressive, the expression that he can convey with the eyes. His teeth on the inside of his mouth here are all individually separated out, so there's no paint bleed between the work on his teeth, and again, I appreciate that. I just recently picked up the baby Godzilla, and his teeth aren't done as well as this, even though these ones are closer together. The tongue, if you can see in there, is a kind of bump on the moulding, and I can't tell if that's a separate piece just glued down or if it's actually just moulded with the bottom of the mouth, but it's nicely defined out in its paintwork as well. Now, I mentioned articulation, so looking at the degree of articulation, the first thing is we have the ability to fully rotate his head around, although why you'd want to put it the whole way backwards, I don't know. His head can go up and down at the neck in two separate places, and you have a bit of side-to-side jiggle. The jaw, which I showed you can go up and down, also has some side-to-side jiggle because it's on a ball. At the shoulder we get a full 360 degrees, although I don't want to force the issue because on this side he tends to come in contact with the scaly section a bit. We have a bicep swivel with a 360 degree capability. The elbow has a double joint. It gives you maybe 80-85 degrees, and it's done really well. The design of the joints cover up any gaps, so even though it's double jointed, we still maintain a good look in any position, and that's one of the best things about these Monsterarts figures in my opinion. The elbow, not the elbow, what am I talking about? The wrist is on a tiny bit of a ball, so you get some jiggle and the full 360. The torso is also connected on what feels like a ball with just a tiny little bit of movement in every direction. Nothing much, just a little bit of rotation and a little bit of jiggle. At the hip, we get a little bit of backwards and forwards and a little bit of in and out, but again, very limited. The knee is double jointed, but only a tiny bit of movement there. Interestingly enough, the knee cap is like a floating piece, although it's hard to show on this Godzilla because it's all tightly in there. But there you go, you can see the knee is a floating sort of cap that just covers up the hole in any position. So that's interesting design, and on the future releases like Space Godzilla, this whole setup becomes much looser. So I'm not sure if I prefer it loose or tight like this. The tightness limits the posability but looks a bit better in hand to me. We have rotation side to side at the knee. The foot is on a little bit of a ball. Losing focus here. So again, not much, just enough to jiggle it basically. Where the posability really excels in this figure is the tail. So pretty much a first for any kind of Godzilla. There's a fully posable tail, ranging from right up like this to stretched right out. And the only downside, which you can see here, is that sometimes the segments get too much of a separation, and you have to individually play with them to get the amount of separation that you desire, and that can be tricky at times. But it's fantastic, the amount of emotion that you can get. So we have side to side, up and down, even kind of an S shape here. The last segment from about here to the end is a solid piece, but all these pieces in the middle give us individual degrees of freedom. One thing to note on my figure though is that if you look here, you'll see this link in his tail is fused together in a crooked way. So if they were all straight, lined up with the back section, this one link here is off center, and that's a bit of a disappointment. I would have liked that to have been straight as well, but it's not too bad. In fact, I had bought this not as a new product, as a second-hand product from BBTS's used section. So maybe that's why this figure was returned. It could be that this off-center link was why it was not new. Alright, let's get to what separates this first release from the subsequent versions. Moving this handsome fellow back here, we've got this energy beam effect part. It's molded in a translucent plastic, which it feels like it's got some paint, and depending on the angle, when I look at it, it seems painted, but I can't see the point at which any paint begins, so it could just as well be molded to refract the light in that way, because it is very textured. The surface is definitely textured, and it physically feels like a smooth sheen on it. I don't want to say slime, but it's got that lubricated kind of feel when I run my finger on it, or perhaps even maybe some tint inside the plastic, because in the thicker chunk at the end it does get more blue than in the narrow whiter end. But either way, it's a nice looking part. That comes with this stand. You can see it's about the same height as Godzilla himself, and this also is very, it's got a this one, I will say, this one feels a little bit slimy. Maybe it's mold release agent, or maybe it's just the plastic itself, but it has more of that silvery sheen on it as well. Some people say this is a water base. I'm not sure. To me it looks like more of an energy wave hitting the ground, but either way it just pegs straight into the bottom of the beam, and it has no physical connection to Godzilla, but what you can do is just position it, if I can get it to stay together, position it so it's emitting from his mouth. Like so. So you can recreate all his attacks from the movies. I particularly like later on, not in Heisei Period, but later in Millennium Period, where when Godzilla attacks, his spine's at the back. Then it's like a precursor. I think that was an improvement. I'd love to get a version of this where you could have optional glowing spines with energy attack. That would be really fantastic. Alright, that's not our only choice though for energy beams to go with Godzilla. I have another figure which is Fire Rodan, and I've got to say, originally I only bought Fire Rodan for the extra that comes with him, but since then he's quite a good figure himself. But that part that I had wanted is this. So this is an extra that you get with Fire Rodan, and it's kind of a spiral red energy beam. I don't know if that's fire or just some different coloured atomic breath, but this is a beautifully done part. All these little bits and pieces that go around are individually moulded, and it's a bit bigger than the atomic breath that comes with the first release Godzilla. To display this, we can just use any base. It does come with one, and we can just pop that in to Godzilla's mouth in the same way. And look at that. My God, nothing will defeat that. Okay, let's put that aside. It's enough of those effects parts. I think now it's time for a bit of a size comparison. So, firstly, let's look at the ruler. What does the ruler say? Let's pull back a little bit. The ruler says 15 centimeters, so 6 inches. Putting the ruler down. Kiriu. I know this is Heisei Godzilla, and this is Kiriu is Millennium, but I bought this Kiriu to go with this Godzilla, so I'm going to just move my camera a little bit. I feel like these guys are perfectly scaled. I mean, it may be a bit off. I'm no height expert when it comes to Godzilla, but from what I understand, Kiriu is a little bit higher than Godzilla, and I like the look of this version of Mechagodzilla better than the one that S.H.Monsterarts have made. So, for me, Chogokin Mechagodzilla is my Mechagodzilla. And they look really fantastic together. I'm very happy with the way that's turned out. If I see a Heisei Period Mechagodzilla for a good price, and I'm talking about $60 or something like that, I may pick it up, but currently they're running 70 plus. I don't feel like buying one of those, although the effects part that you got with Rodan, the extra head for it, has pushed me a little bit in that direction. My next comparison is with Space Godzilla. So these guys are in the same continuity and are supposed to verse each other. Now, being that Space Godzilla is a clone of Godzilla, I guess he should be the same size, but I had imagined that he's a little bit taller, and I guess he is just a fraction taller if you count that bump on his head. But he's definitely fatter. So Space Godzilla has more in this department and more up here than Godzilla. So he feels a bit heavier, but the height is about the same. And finally, here is my Monsterarts Godzilla versus my X Plus Godzilla from 1992, Godzilla vs. Mothra. And this big guy here, he is my favourite Godzilla, I've got to say. I think that all things considered, given that I'm a collector who puts stuff on the shelf, it looks a bit better, but you can see he's much bigger, about half the size. So he's only up to just above the top of the leg, but if I can bring his head down a little bit lower, in profile you can tell it's the same guy. They do look very similar, but this is my favourite. As a line though, the S.H.Monsterarts beats any kind of vinyls hands down. So once you've got a whole bunch of these these Monsterarts guys, they are fantastic on the shelf, and you can actually play with them. I can move him around, put him into poses, put him with Baby Godzilla. I've got King Ghidorah. It's a lot of fun to own these, and not so much fun to own vinyls. So the vinyls are good to have, but these are good to play with. So my final thoughts on S.H.Monsterarts Godzilla. I can easily say I highly recommend this figure. And unlike a lot of stuff, it's not that hard to get at the moment. There are currently pre-orders up for the reissue of this Godzilla. Originally those pre-orders were dated for the end of December 2012 and then for January 2013. Now they're sitting somewhere at first quarter 2013. So you could pre-order this figure for $65 plus shipping, which is not bad. It's a pretty good price. I did have a pre-order for the reissue, and that's just, I kept it as an insurance policy in case I couldn't get an older one. I mentioned earlier that I bought this secondhand, and that wasn't because I didn't have access to a new one. I wanted to get a good price on one of these guys who has the effect part. So the effect part is a big deal for me. I mean, I don't feel that Godzilla is going to be complete without the effect part, so I didn't want to miss out on that. I think the price I paid was $60 plus shipping, so I actually got it cheaper. And as far as I can tell, there is, except for that little offset problem on the tail, there is nothing wrong with this figure in any way. So I think I got a good deal. On eBay at the moment, I've noticed these guys going for about $80 to $90 plus shipping. I wasn't prepared to pay that. I definitely recommend going out and buying it if you can afford it. If you have a hard time paying that much for a Godzilla figure, there are tons of cheap Godzilla figures around, but none of them are near the level of fun that this guy is. So that's pretty much it. That's my video review for Godzilla, Heisei Period from S.H.Monsterarts, the first release. I'm Odeean, and thank you for watching.